When people use the word underrated, it generally just means it's something that they like that no one else does. With a game like Sin though, the term underrated is much more closer to its actual definition.
Surprise!
Sin is a first-person shooter developed by Ritual Entertainment and released in 1998. Like so many other games of the same year, it was overshadowed, unfairly I might add, by Half-Life. Still though, Sin is an awesome shooter and something I view as a swan song to FPS games of the 90s. It was largely let down by some unfortunate bugs, more so than its core gameplay.
Blade, talk to me, man.
You assume the role of John Blade, the leader of a private security force named Hard Corps, working in the fictional futuristic city of Freeport. Blade is pretty much an amalgamation of all the badass action heroes from the 80s and 90s, and brings along a few one-liners of his own.
Rock and roll!
Assisting you mission to mission is Blade's tech expert, JC, the brain to Blade's brawn, and akin to a rational voice in Blade's head.
Ask Hadwin and Mueller to check out his ovaries.
Mueller, Hadwin, check his ovaries. What?
The story starts off with a fairly routine bank heist led by a lowly mobster named Mancini. Blade soon foils Mancini's plans, chasing him throughout the Freeport streets and rooftops before a much more sinister plot is revealed.
Oh my god!
This involves mutants and standard world domination type stuff, led by Alexa Sinclair, the beautiful CEO of a large biotech company, Syntech.
Welcome to the dawn of a new age.
Alexis is something of a latex-wearing boobs on legs, who talks like she's operating a phone sex line.
I'm extremely pleased by your devotion to the cause. You may join me in my chambers at 11:30 this evening.
Though that's kind of keeping with the game's charm, and it's really not meant to be taken too seriously. Needless to say, there's a brain behind all of those looks, and she's more than a match for Blade.
Nude on my ass, you wacky bitch.
I don't want to say too much about the story, but I will just say that it has a few neat twists here and there, and it ends on a really sweet cliffhanger. For its time, Sin was an extremely advanced game. It used a really cool location-based damage system. Shooting someone in the head, for instance, was most likely an instant kill, whereas shooting them in the hand could cause them to drop their equipped weapon. Instead of a generic armor system, the armor was divided between head, torso, and legs, with damage taken dependent on which area was hit and how much armor was left for that particular body part. This would also carry over to enemies, meaning enemies with lots of torso armor would take a lot more hits before going down. In that regard, Blade has no shortage of weapons to kill bad guys with. You start off with Blade's iconic Magnum pistol before getting your hands on a submachine gun, then a shotgun, before upgrading to rocket launchers and particle weapons. It's a pretty stock standard lineup, but they're all modeled with incredible attention to detail and feature some great particle effects. The rocket launcher in particular is really fun to use. Much like Quake II and Kingpin, attacking enemies will also visually affect their character models, indicating whereabouts you may have hit them. Enemies also show off some really clever artificial intelligence, fleeing when heavily damaged and busting out karate kicks and judo chops when you get too close to them. This level of detail also carries across the environment, showing off a really high level of interactivity, from simple things like opening doors and flushing toilets, through to being able to hack into various computer terminals, and modifying security parameters within the levels. It all runs more than adequately on the Quake II engine, and visually everything has been put together in such a way that it feels very palpable and realistic. From banks to subway stations and oil rigs, everything feels like it has a purpose and more than just a series of corridors. The levels were created to offer multiple pathways and playstyles. Certain levels can be stealth entirely, for instance, though most of the time this was left up to the discretion of the player. Blade always has a specific set of main objectives, though he also has a series of secondary objectives, which can also be completed.
It's the construction blueprints. It might help you later on. Now please go before I get in trouble.
These don't really add anything to the overall story, though it's really just there to increase the length of the levels. This could be something as simple as not harming innocent civilians to making sure no alarms are sounded.
Run to safety. Thanks, get out of here.
Some levels in particular could be bypassed completely if the player took a different route, and there's even a few instances where your choices from earlier levels carry on to the subsequent areas, affecting the amount of guards on duty or even changing the layout of the level entirely. Before I move on, I also feel compelled to mention the music, which may be one of the most badass soundtracks in any shooting game perhaps ever. Composed by Zach Belika, who also worked on the recent Sin episodes, the music adapts to Blade's actions to ramp up during more action-packed moments, whilst taking a backseat during exploration and puzzle solving. Now, I could talk all fucking day about how much I love this game, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty and talk about what's wrong with it.
Blade, talk to me!
Before I start sounding like Mark Bustler. Sin is a game that is good, and I like to play good games. Sin is a really temperamental game. It had a lot of compatibility issues when it was released, and it still does to this day. It's not too hard to get it running with a few fan-made patches, but it still has a few issues with certain things, namely modern resolutions and load times. The load times in particular can range from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. Yeah, I timed it. Regardless of what type of rig you've got, it's going to take a bit of playing around to get it running properly. Which kind of sucks when you realize that other games of its time, like Quake II and Half-Life, don't really have this problem. Some of the later levels can also be quite difficult, not because of the way they've been designed, more often because health items are totally absent. I'm not even joking, there's a few levels near the end of the game where they throw dozens of enemies at you and don't give you a single fucking health kit. It doesn't help that these areas are also littered with well-hidden snipers that can kill you in 1 or 2 hits.
Blade is down! I repeat, Blade is down!
You can make it through these areas by exploiting the AI and peeking around corners, but it's not really that fun playing that way, and I'm sure that's not the way it was intended. Finally, whilst the game does have controllable vehicles, which is cool as hell and a really good idea, they ultimately handle like dog shit. It's just really hard to get the hang of how to use them, and as a result, you'll probably not even bother. Shortly after Sin's release, an expansion pack named Wages of Sin was released. As I mentioned earlier in the review, Sin ends on something of a cliffhanger, and as a result, Wages of Sin tries to continue the story from where Sin left off, with mixed results.
Sinclair did not bring you into this world to watch game shows. You are the chosen people.
As far as expansions go, it's definitely one of the better expansion packs of its time. However, it is an absolute bitch to get running properly, and takes a lot of screwing around. As a result, as much as it pains me to say this, it's really not worth it just for the 2 or 3 hour campaign it delivers. Maybe someday in the future there'll be a high definition remake that'll put both of these games back side by side where they belong. After this, the story was again followed up in 2006 with Sin Episodes, a game I reviewed a few months ago. Sin Episodes is a worthy enough sequel, though it was created on the basis of it being the first in a series of games that were ultimately cancelled. So as a result, it's more of a cock tease than anything else. When all is said and done, Sin really is a fantastic, largely underrated game that is one of the last great FPS titles of the 90s. It was one of the last FPS games to feature a trash-talking badass, much akin to Duke Nukem and Lo Wang, and this is something that has never really been brought back to the industry.
That has got to hurt.
The silent, Gordon Freeman-style protagonists are all fine and dandy, but I'd still take a one-line spouting juicehead over them any day of the goddamn week.
I'm kicking your ass later, JC. You do realize that, right?
So if you are willing to play around with a few settings and do a bit of file searching online to get the game running, then Sin is definitely worthy of your attention.
Dead. Dead dumb bitch.